someone who's been teaching me a lot, Craig Johnson's face. So I'll introduce him later. But so thank you and welcome to environmental justice of Tri-County sustainability. We got a couple different items. I know some people are short on time, so I wanted to get some people out of the way first before we start with our star here, Craig Johnson. Renee, do you want to start first, and then we'll go to Chris? I think that's
yeah. Good afternoon, everybody.
Hello.
I apologize for the raspiness, because pollen hasn't been my friend lately. It's about a 1/4 inch thick on my car, so I apologize. So I just wanted to bring a little awareness to the mold issue in the state, in many states actually, but and also the failure for government to regulate it. So for residents in New Jersey, including about 1 million renters, protections exist for lead, asbestos, and radon, but there are no protections for mold. Landlords are not required to remediate mold, and the state has no cleanup standards. And we know public health consequences are very severe for mold, and more severe in lower income communities. General mold is a very insidious problem. So back in, Singer, back in, let me see if I get the year right. Don't think I have the year, but maybe back in 2012. Senator Robert Singer has repeatedly introduced this legislation, 81, that would protect renters from like mold infestation. And he proposed the Mold Safe Housing Act, which calls for mold inspections whenever a new tenant moves into an apartment. It also declares that the premises must be free of or visible of detectable indications of substantial presence of mold. And the mold problem requires, if the mold problem requires tenants to move out during remediation, the landlord would have to cover the costs for reimbursement. Now, this legislation has been introduced since 2013, but it has not gone anywhere. So we're hoping, we get enough, press around it or just bring awareness to it, that maybe it would move. It was reintroduced to another accompanying bill. Senator Greenstein was co-sponsor, and it is A4039. So with this identical bill, we're hoping that we can get some movement on this. It's just another air quality issue that has gone unchecked for many, many years. So I just wanted to highlight that a little bit. I was waiting to have the opportunity to say something about it, but I'm not sure if anybody on the call is aware of these issues. So I just wanted to bring some awareness to it.
Thanks a lot, Renee, for that. That's real important. We always forget the inside air, don't we? We're focusing on the outside air.
Sometimes it can be more important than the outside air.
So, does anybody have any questions, comments for Renee real quick? And then we'll move on to our next.
Just one quick one. Renee, Sean, I know you're jamming, you got to jump off, but maybe we early next week, we can draft a sample letter for everybody on the call to send to our assembly folks and senators.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, I'll call you Monday or Tuesday.
Yeah, the more the co-sponsors we get, maybe we can get some movement on it. It will really be beneficial.
Awesome.
All right,
is it possible to get like an informational fact sheet about mold? Because some people don't understand all the different colors that mold can come in, and they don't understand that it could be yellow, it could be black, it could be white, it could be green, and
sometimes they can't even see it. That's the real problem.
Right, and they paint over it and it just looks like little bubbles.
Yeah,
and to me, it's something that a lot of like the Department of Public Works or like maintenance departments for like housing, they need to be aware of it, because when they come in, they don't see it. And so many young children in a lot of EJ communities are suffering from not just respiratory problems, it becomes neurological, because the way fungus is, mold, it gets into your system, it clouds your thinking. It's not even lead, like it's still sort of like lead poisoning. But what mold fungi does to you, is very interesting and unique, and people don't know about it.
Yes,
So-
absolutely. It's the mold spores. And you know, when mold spores are out in the air, they just infiltrate into your system. This is like, you know, just like you said, just like pollution, same kind of scenario. You
Yep.
know, affects your development, especially in young children, you know,
Mhm.
all those things. So yes, it is very important. So
Everything.
maybe I'll try to find, if I can see if I can find a fact sheet that we can, you know, put out there or something like that.
Please do. Maybe so, like
Good.
an infographic or something.
Yeah. Mhm.
Infograph. Show all the
Craig,
colors.
Craig just highlighted a link in the chat. With
Okay.
EP mold, so maybe you want to take a look at that. Thank you, Renee, for that. Appreciate that.
Yes. Thank you.
Next is Chris. Chris is gonna give us an update, really happy update on, I think a happy update on Bill 232, which we all were a part of and fought for, and I think it's been implemented. So Chris, you want to give your update?
Yeah, sure, no problem. But just to finish off with something Renee was saying, I can tell you guys from my experience, if any of our clients happen to find black mold on any of their properties, just as an example, the extent that they have to go to actually remediate these things, it's like they have to dress going to war. So if you contrast that with the little kids being in front of it every day, I mean, that really paints the picture as to the effect that it's having. So it's definitely an important topic. But yeah, obviously the environmental justice laws came out on Monday. I was personally a little frustrated it took as long as it did, because if you looked at the comment package, there weren't many changes to the proposal. So this thing could have come out months ago, would have been the exact same. But with that aside, there were some important tweaks that were actually made and things that were emphasized. As an example, the DEP stressed that compelling public interest is only going to be allowed in a very, very small number of cases, mostly for things like public water utilities and things like that, that is a very 100% firm case. But a lot of the other sites that thought they were going to be able to go that route aren't going to be able to. So I think that's positive. The actual process itself stayed largely the same. Again, not a whole lot of changes from the proposal, but they went into extra detail what they want and things like the environmental justice impact statement, which is a point-by-point analysis of cumulative impacts in the area. So again, I think a very, very important step is something that's going to be, I kind of like to actually use the word cherry picked by other states around the country. And then another important focus that was made that I was actually thrilled by and didn't expect. DEP also spent a lot of time trying to define what meaningful public engagement actually is. Because up until now, and this is the topic I've been talking about for a couple of years, people, especially people who've been in sciences, get terrified by this. And they really don't have to. But this kind of guidance, I think, will help a lot of people and hopefully push this further along. But I put together a summary document on this that I think I sent to Bill and Sean and maybe a couple other people before the call. So happy to share that also. But as a little side note, we're also hosting a panel discussion on the topic in a couple of weeks with the Business Industry Association, some colleagues of mine, a couple of attorneys to talk about this from different perspectives and basically give our advice for where we think this is going forward. So all positive and encouraging, but I would, to give a full report here, I also have to talk about the bad stuff that I know is also coming. There are going to be challenges on this. It's not going to surprise anybody, I'm sure. But there are people lining up the challenge of validity and legality of this. Doesn't mean that it's not going to keep going forward. The law is a law as of today, but it is going to be challenged. So we'll see where that goes. And of course, I'll follow it. And things like, I'm sure you probably heard too, there's actually a Supreme Court case, I think pending right now. If not, it's going to be very soon, about affirmative action in college admissions. a lot of people think that could potentially impact environmental justice laws throughout the country. I don't, but it's another thing to definitely have an eye on.
Thanks, Chris. That was great. Does anybody have a
Sure.
brief comment? Because I do want to get to Craig. I'm so excited. I feel like I'm gonna get a Christmas. Does anybody have a brief comment for Chris or any questions? And I'll try and get that that link you sent. I'll put it into the chat while Craig is talking.
Yeah, sure.
Does anybody have any comments, questions? Okay.
I have a question.
Okay.
Hi, Bill. Let me get my video on. Okay, Kevin Barfield, Canada for Clean Air. So my question would be, because I have not, been able to read the regs. So when they talked about meaningful public engagement, was they having any specifics in reference to what does that look like? Rather it's in person, because I know, like, for instance, when we was just recently dealing with Covanta, it was, by video. But just this past, Tuesday or so, Monday, when we went to the EMR permit public hearing, it was in person. So did the regs outline exactly what do they consider meaningful public engagement?
Yes, it did, and it went by actually step by step in a lot of ways. So I think that was a positive. But just as a little background too, a lot of these permits have been coordinated through the DEP's Office of Permit and Project Development. And this is a little frustrating. Their initial guidance was to do online only, and they switched it to hybrid. So that's actually why the people who've been doing their hearings and meetings lately have been going to hybrid. But Covanta, I know, and a couple other sites started off doing online because they were advised to that way. Not trying to excuse anybody, but that's the background of it.
Well, let me just say this. They switched to hybrid for a lot of places because they got a lot of complaints.
Oh, I'm
They
sure.
were supposed to, it was lined that, it was outlined that they were supposed to do both, make it, more accessible for people in person and people online. So that's probably the reason why a lot of them have switched to hybrid.
All right. Well, thanks for that, everybody. I'm going to I guess introduce my guest. So I'm going to introduce Craig Johnson. Craig has produced and directed more than 50 award-winning videos, films, exhibits, and art installations. These efforts are focused on the integration of engaging storytelling, creative design, and innovative media technology. Craig's studio, called Interpret Green, develops a program content that advocates for social justice, environmental literacy, public health, and programs that connect children with nature. His recent work is devoted to creating programs and installations that help us see the invisible of our relationship with nature and each other. This includes integrating environmental monitoring of air, heat, water, and soil with educational programs for schools, parks, libraries, civic, and public health organizations. Craig's studio and home is at Glen Fern, a historic house in Fairmount Park, next to the Wissahickon Creek in Mount Airy. His clients include the Smithsonian, the National Park Service, Independent Visitor Center, Fairmount, Waterworks Interpretive Center, School District of Philadelphia, DuPont Environmental Education Center, African American Museum of Philadelphia, and the Trust for Public Lands. I want to welcome Craig. I'm really excited to talk a little bit about air monitoring and hopefully we can think about how we can use Craig's knowledge to help us here in New Jersey. Welcome, Craig.
Thanks, Bill. I thought I'd start by just putting up a few visuals. So I'll do that right now. Can you all see that?
Yep.
Oh, good. Okay. So I'm going to talk specifically about kind of air today. This will be short, maybe get through it in 15 minutes or so, and then hopefully we'll have a conversation. And I got involved in air with several projects my studio did beginning about 6 years ago with the school district of Philadelphia. And our initiative was try to imagine schoolyards, school grounds, as not just recreational places or sports or playgrounds, but how could school grounds become a nature center in itself, a place where students could learn about nature and have pollinator gardens and ways of kind of connecting with the outside world. And this really flourished during the pandemic, when it was understood that outdoor classrooms were both healthy and instructive. And what we ended up doing was bringing to kind of a learning environment like a school a lot of the high engagement techniques that we do in nature centers and science centers and environmental education centers. So along with kind of obvious pollinator gardens and things like that, we put in air quality monitors and a weather station and digital cameras and birdhouses and bird feeders, and students could watch birds fly in and make a nest and lay eggs and hatch and watch them fledge. And all of that information in terms of environmental monitoring and metering then went into the school as data, and then we developed graphical interfaces so the students could explore and build, think of it as like environmental dashboards that allowed them to see patterns in air, water, heat, and things like that. And Bill said that right now, one of the areas that you're specifically interested in is air. And we met online at it was a Sierra Club meeting, wasn't it? Environmental Sierra Club meeting. So this for me is just a little fun way to start, air is a gas. We can't see air, that's true. But often we feel air in the things that we do. Air keeps up a kite, air fills up a bubble, and without air to breathe, we would be in big trouble. So I particularly like that, with kind of looking at what's invisible and kind of so important for us, kind of every day. So in terms of air and breath, we're really dependent on breath. And there's something kind of the rule of three, maybe some of you know this, that you can live without food. You starve, but you live without food for 30 days. You can live without water for 3 to 5 days, but you really can't live without air for 3 minutes. And because breathing and air are so much a part of our automatic nervous system, we kind of self-regulate, and breathing faster or slower, we hardly have to pay any attention to it. But it does become really critical if we don't have air to breathe, or the air that we're breathing isn't healthy. So I'd like to do this for just a moment. I'm going to start this timer and just watch it. Hold your breath and see how long you can hold your breath. Maybe some of you are holding your breath. I can't hold it more than 30 seconds. I don't know about anybody else, but it's a good reminder of what happens. Hold on for a second. Sorry. We don't need to do that again. get over here to this, my screen again. So if we think of our breathing in a kind of close-up, this is what's going on, right? And at about this rate. So we're taking the outside and bringing it inside. Bringing the outside world and bringing it inside. And again, we don't really, oops, that's the end of that. We don't really, we're not really aware of that in a meaningful way. I've got to break out of this for a second and get back to my presentation here. But that process is happening all the time. So the membrane between the outer world and inner world on a very, very fundamental level is maintained by our breathing. Quick question, like how many times a day does the average person breathe? What do you think? So in general, if we breathe 15 times a minute, we're breathing 60,000 times a day. And just think of the air itself. Like how many gallons of air? Just give you a sense of scale. So on average, we're breathing about 2,000 gallons of air are passing through our bodies every day. And if you look at what's in the air, this drawing it's used a lot to kind of illustrate the size of particles. This is a human hair, right? And this is how small these particles are. But the particles, even though that they're very small, they're not just like sand or dust. There can be all kinds of other materials that are carried on the particle itself, like bacteria or asbestos or viruses or pollen for those who have seasonal allergies. They know exactly what we're talking about here. And if we look at the size of beach sand versus the size of a particulate, when it comes into our bodies through our lungs, depending upon its size, it can go directly in our bloodstream. And the size of the particle is equivalent to how quickly it can go in. So particles, these ultrafine, kind of thinking of nanoparticles, go immediately from our lungs into our body. The 2.5 and 0.1 fine particles mainly stay in the lungs as they go in, get into our sinuses and slowly get into our body, and the larger particles are somewhat filtered by our lungs. And there's a lot more attention these days for these smaller particles and how they affect health. So in sensing, what we're really trying to do is we're really trying to see the invisible. And one of the challenges is that our eyes have evolved so that we don't see air. Because if we saw air would get in the way as a bipedal hominid to grab a branch and move through trees or move through underbrush. If we saw air, we wouldn't know where to go and how to navigate. So our eyes have evolved to not see air. In doing that, there are a lot of properties of air that are really important that we can't visualize. So Bill and I were talking a couple of days ago, and I was saying, if we could see carbon monoxide, we probably wouldn't be driving cars. We'd see it. It would be all around us. We'd see highways as this channel, as this road of congestion and dust and gases and such, all concentrated along the road. But we can't see that. So what we're trying to do with environmental sensing is having sensors that can extend our capacity to see, to visualize. And I often like to equate it to telescopes and microscopes. And that when Galileo, saw the moons of Jupiter or saw the mountains on the moon, and he was getting equations about being able to measure parallax, it was really clear that there were other entities out in the universe, and the Earth was probably not the center of it. Even though he was brought before the Inquisition, the instrument that allowed him to see the world literally in a new way, kind of transformed, launched the Renaissance into a new way of thinking about humans and their relationship to the natural world. Microscopes did the same thing. Without microscopes, nobody could really see all the life that was in water. With the microscope, you went, oh my God, it's all alive. There's all kinds of stuff in there. Maybe that's where cholera comes from. And I think that using environmental sensing, whether it's air or water, heat index, that connected to dashboards and data visualization will be the telescopes and microscopes of our ability to see our environment of the 21st century. It would be like being able to put on goggles or looking through a microscope or telescope to be able to see the world in a new way. And I think that may be transformative. I sure hope it is, but might be transformative. And one of the areas that Bill and I talked about, and it seemed that you might be interested in, is to know a little bit more about the methodology and maybe some of the instruments that are used in air quality monitoring. I'm kind of showing three categories here. One is a mobile unit. This is a mobile unit that connects to your phone. As you move around, it takes recordings, geo records the data and the location, and then you can see a map that has a line that shows you the quality of air that you've moved through or that you're moving through. This is a kind of a mobile unit. This is a stationary unit called an AirNote that I'm pretty fond of. That's solar powered and cellular connected, very easy to install. And this is from a company out in California called Clarity IO. It's solar powered, cellular connected, and uses calibrated sensors. The mobile unit and the basic kind of station unit uses quality sensors, but they're not calibrated to a scientific standard reference. And what we've been doing in schools, and I'll just share this with you as a larger context, is we're imagining having a sensing station in schools, parks, public venues that has a series of integrated sensors, a weather station, air quality and heat index, and water and soil, and that these can connect to multiple smaller sensors, let's say around the schoolyard, under a tree canopy, in shade versus sun, things like that. Multiple small air quality monitors. We see a big difference between the parking lot and the schoolyard, if the schoolyard is in asphalt. So thinking of this as a system really has lots of advantages. During COVID, um, we were asked to come up with some ideas to extend the school day, connect students with the outdoors for outdoor classrooms from pre-K through 5. This is a traditional growing high tunnel. It has a big solar panel to power. And then we've added birdhouses with digital cameras, weather stations, lots of opportunities for students to explore the environment specifically in which they live. And in terms of measuring, then we take a device like an AirNote. I brought one here, which I can show you. Actually, I think I'm just going to stop for a second here, and just can you all see this? Okay, yep. So this is an air quality monitor. Case closes like that. The front of it here, solar panel, right? So it doesn't need any external power. Air goes in the bottom. Inside of it, I don't know if you're seeing it okay. This is the sensor. Has a rechargeable battery. Has a little LCD display for setup. Has a QR code here. And setup is simply mounting this outdoors or mounting it on an outdoor window, taking your phone, reading the QR code. It immediately takes you to a website for AirNote. You put in your email address, it knows your location, and it'll show you data in 5 minutes. It's that simple. If we had more time, I'll tell you the wonderful story about the origin of this that came from developing Geiger counters, radiation monitors after Fukushima. The interesting thing about this is that the fellow that developed the sensors in Japan for the Japanese to do basically citizen science so that they could monitor their own environment. He realized that the biggest restraining component of all environmental sensings were not the instrument, it was the connectivity. So he came up with a methodology working with cellular phone companies to have a special rate for data. So you don't have to do a full Verizon, registration for just a little tiny bit of data. And when you buy this unit, you get 10 years of free data connectivity. This costs $150 with 10 years of operation. Hold on for a second. And just real quick, many of you may know this, but the way that the particulate sensor works, that there's a laser, air passes through, the very fine particles scatter the light, then there's a target here that reads the amount of light that goes through and then calculates the size of the particles. In schools now, we're beginning to put these kind of systems together, comparing school to school in different sites. The data goes up to the cloud. The sensor data is stored in an archive. You can then access the archive with a dashboard and then look and study for patterns. This is what the spreadsheet looks like for 8 or 9 minutes of operation. So we want to do data visualization. This is an example of a dashboard for data visualization. I'm going to show you in real time. This is real time. Can you still see my screen? So it's measuring 3 different sizes of particulates: temperature, humidity, and heat index. This is the location of it in Philadelphia. It's equated to air quality standard World Health Organization scale. Gives you a quick summary. You can look at individual particulates. Gives you graphs of the data. You buy the instrument, you plug it in, you turn it on, and this is what you get. And you can download this data free. It's in a forever archive. You can create your own dashboard from the data and basically kind of keep on going. This is one of my favorite. Hold on for a second. I don't know if anybody are familiar with Null Earth. It's one of really my favorite data visualizations. But you can you all see that? You all see the map? So you're looking at wind. Here we are right here in New Jersey, Philadelphia, right here, Camden. You can get pretty close. You can see the patterns of the wind. But then you can go to the menu, and then you can look at all kinds of other things. Wind, temperature, relative humidity, and you can look at it at ground level, 50 feet, 100 feet, 75 feet. And it's a really effective way of actually seeing the weather, seeing the invisible, seeing patterns. One thing that I thought would be of interest to you is that we've worked a lot over at the refinery, the decommissioned refinery. I won't go through this particular news segment, but tell me if you can hear the audio. Are we set up for audio here? Hopefully. Can you hear audio? You can't hear audio? Yes, no.
I don't think I can hear it.
I don't
Okay.
think so.
Well,
Craig, if you want to stop sharing your screen for 1 second, share again, but before you pick the screen, you just do optimize for audio. That might work.
yeah, I think I should be optimized for audio. Let me see. I thought check my video settings. Looks like it's optimized. Maybe I'll just take a pass of it, so we have a little more time to talk. But I wanted to, let me see here. I am optimized for audio. What it is, it's from the EPA, and it's the video of the explosion at the refinery. Oh, let me just try one more time. Were you able to hear anything?
No, I couldn't. That's okay, Craig.
Yeah. So basically what it does is that it's showing so it's a moment by moment description of the explosion at the old refinery. In lieu of kind of showing you a little bit more, maybe I'll pause here and see if you have any questions or things that you'd like to chat about.
One thing I wanted to, I wonder if you could comment on, and I know you're not endorsing any products here or not unendorsing any products.
Right.
We like for instance, Ben said in his chat, we use the wind maps in conjunction with purple air sensors.
Mhm.
Frequently in Camden, have directly seen increases in PM when the wind is blowing from scrap and automatic
Right.
flow files. I just wanted to know, I mean, I know we talked a lot about calibrated versus uncalibrated
Right.
sensors and that how important that is. And
Right.
also if you could talk a little bit, and I know don't endorse, because I know you don't want to
Oh,
endorse.
no, I'm happy to speak.
But-
This is a purple air.
Yeah, so if you could talk a little bit maybe about the differences in air sensors and kind of the advantages and disadvantages of,
Yeah.
purple.
Real quick. So here's two different instruments. They use almost identical sensors. Their operation is the same, almost. The difference is connectivity. This, you basically turn a switch on the bottom and it's running. It self-powers, connects cellularly. I like the purple air, but you have to plug it into a source, AC line source, and you have to have Wi-Fi. In general, if you're trying to do remote sensing, let's say around a scrapyard or in an outdoor area, you can take something like this. We have straps for it, and you can put it around a pole, turn it on, and it's operational in 2 minutes. I don't necessarily advocate one or the other, but if you, for ease of use, it's half the price and much easier to install.
And we have a couple of questions too, Greg.
Sure.
But also, can you comment about the calibrated versus uncalibrated a little bit?
Sure. With calibrated sensors, they're actually put in a chamber, and their operation, their sensitivity, is tested and aligned. Though non-calibrated instruments cost between $100 and $300. Calibrated instruments are 3 or 4 times that. The ones that we use the most are from a company out in California called Clarity. And they have a different kind of business model. They don't actually sell their instrument. They do what's called sensing as a service. So that you basically like lease the unit from them. They manage it all for you. They manage the data, make it available to you in any way. And they ensure the operation of it. And it's a calibrated unit. So if we're doing outdoor measurements, air quality measurements, that we want to like present at a public hearing in which there might be other engineers there or epidemiologists who focus on air. You can use a non-calibrated instrument to indicate potential danger. But if you want to have science-backed, evidence calibrated machine, like this is undeniable, completely defensible data that any scientist would want, you'd go with a calibrated machine. The ones from Clarity, we were able to do an annual contract at about $1,200 a year for those instruments. And particularly for community-based organizations using these kinds of instruments maybe to get started. And then if you see a real hazard and you want to get a higher level of authenticity and documentation, you'll go with a calibrated instrument like a Clarity. And you can just get in touch with them. They'll manage the setup and they'll manage the operation for a year.
Thanks, Greg. We got 2 questions. One from Sean. Did you have a question? Your hand.
Yeah, I do. Real quick, thanks, Bill. Craig, this is awesome. Really, really informative. Thank you. As you know, the organization is called Tri-County Sustainability, and a lot of our focus, rightfully so, is on Camden, and that's where Balloon Association, even this week, continues to give us poor grades. But what's very frustrating for us is that Burlington County it's NA when those reports come out because they don't have monitors. And I think that the history there is it's the biggest geographical county in New Jersey, that I think some of the farmland balances out some of the emissions closer to Philadelphia. And so as an organization, we're most likely going to be looking to put some of our own monitors out there. And so is there a recommendation, I know you're not here to pick winners and losers in terms of products, but
I'll advise you. I'm not, I have my preferences. So I'll share. I'm completely transparent with this. I don't sell stuff, so
So speaking about those towns along the stuck between I-95 and Route 130 on the Delaware River, Palmyra, Burlington City, Bordentown. What strategically, what would you like if you were us trying to measure that area? What would be your strategy?
I would start with something like these air notes. And I would put some up. I would think that there are. I don't know, the Camden area as well as I know the Philadelphia area. But I definitely know people in Philadelphia who probably know Camden or know somebody in Camden that has some experience with air quality monitoring. I mean, in Philadelphia, our public health department has air management services. We don't really, I wouldn't say we don't hold them in high regard, but we really are very disappointed with their lack of transparency. For the entire city of Philadelphia, they have 11 monitors. The county and the city are the same size. I mean, they will tell you what's happening around a specific 3 or 4 block area, but they really can't give you an idea of what's happening. We've got, heat index, Center City to Chestnut Hill, there's a 20-degree difference. We'll have, poor or hazardous air quality in Center City, and in Chestnut Hill, it's just fine. So the real insights come by comparison, comparing one area versus another. And the advantage of these less expensive units is you can get some really good insight into where there may be real pockets of concern and be able to document them. You can move these units from place to place. And they're geocoded, so they know where they are. And that would probably be your best bet. Buy a few of them, get some experience. I'd be happy, or people that I collaborate with, to help you set it up.
Thanks, Craig. That's great. Ben, did you want to ask a question? Your hand's up.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry if it's noisy. I'm in my backyard. It's really interesting to learn about those sensors that have the built-in, a built-in battery and solar panel and Wi-Fi chip or data chip in them. One question I have is, one of the sort of useful things about the purple air monitors is the fact that there's that public map for them, right? And that I guess it's an open API, so I guess you can connect the data or grab the data from it. Is there a similar platform for the model that you showed that has the built-in solar model? And a second follow-up to that, is there a way for an organization that may be using multiple types of monitors to have an easy-to-use platform to incorporate data from multiple different types?
Bingo. That's a great question. Really great question. We like to describe what we're doing as device agnostic. Like we don't want to build any kind of environmental monitoring system that's dependent on one kind of device or one kind of technology. All of these instruments, whether it's Purple Air, AirNote, Clarity, have an API in which you can connect to and be able to stream data or access data in particular data ranges. there's a nonprofit out of Washington, D.C. Called Open AQ, Open Air Quality. And their aspiration is to be the national, if not international, archive of air quality data. A number of organizations that have instruments, that make instruments, are streaming their data through the API from their devices to the archive in Washington, the OpenAQ, for long-term storage and accessibility, of that data. And in terms of building your own, let's say, dashboard, that ends up being a little bit more challenging. There are apps that allow you to do it. The map of the purple air, it's not really an air quality map. It's a device map with color-coded circles for the readings of a particular instrument. It's useful. It's kind of interesting. It doesn't really provide the kind of interpretation that you need to make sense out of the data, though it can display it. The real insight comes from comparing one site to another site, or comparing one time to another time. That comparison is, over time, is the one that really generates meaning and kind of actionable data that you can advocate for environmental justice and social justice.
Yeah, so Craig, just to jump in, one of the things we talked about, and you kind of gave me the vision, is a weather map where you have air quality and you have air sensors, just like we have with weather maps of temperature and heat.
Exactly.
Imagine where you're seeing, a plume of, particles going across a map. That's what we're talking about, more comprehensive. So you could actually kind of figure out what the source is and the effect and the impact.
Right.
So that's what Craig. So that's always
And it just, thanks, Bill. Our aspiration is to put air quality monitors and heat index monitors and soil and moisture temperature monitors in all 320 schools in Philadelphia, and use those nodes to build a real-time map, a real-time data map of the flow of the environment, heat, air quality, gases, you name it. And at that scale, you'll be able to do it. I do want to mention before we depart that there is money available by EPA grants. Probably New Jersey has some state grants that will help underwrite the procurement of air quality instruments and really help support increasing environmental justice in your communities.
Yeah, just one more thing too, Craig. We could talk about all day.
Oh yeah.
but one thing that we might be missing here, because you talked a lot about one of your projects is the refineries, right?
Right.
And that's not necessarily particulate matter. That's also gases, and that's something that that's something we need to kind of be looking at too. Maybe not as a first pass, but also being that we have Cavanta, we don't really know, we probably know what they might be spewing out, but we don't know what kind of damage they're doing and the impact.
Right.
We don't have that sensing around them.
That's right.
That they can capture, organic and vapors and gases.
Yeah. Around the refinery, one of the biggest concerns is benzene, and we're working with a group from Drexel, and we're doing fence line monitoring of benzene. The health risks of benzene are really high. The gases that were released with the explosion of the refinery it was literally a miracle that 60,000 people were killed. I mean, it was just they just escaped by a hair. They had a special tank or reservoir to dump really toxic chemicals that are used in high performance cracking, and they were able to get about 85% of that material in a safe container before it was released. But we could very easily have had another Bhopal, even worse.
We've actually ran out of time. I feel like we should be talking more about this. I'm sorry. Does anybody? Well, first of all, I want to thank Craig for this great presentation. Can we give him like a round of applause, everyone? It was really,
Yay.
really good.
I'm so appreciative. Thank you.
Does anybody have any other? Unfortunately, we're going to have to, I guess, delay our updates for next time. But thanks everybody for attending, and thank you, Craig. And we'll see everybody next month.
All right. Have a good one.
Thanks, everyone. Happy Earth Day.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.
Good weekend.
Bye.
So long, everybody.
See ya.